You know that feeling when you eat a meal and within an hour you're exhausted, foggy, and somehow hungrier than you were before you ate. Or maybe you've noticed that no matter how much you exercise or how carefully you count calories, the weight just won't budge, especially around your midsection. Here's something most people don't realize. It might not be about willpower or discipline at all. Your body might actually be rejecting carbohydrates at a fundamental level. And today I'm going to show you the 8 clear signs that this is happening to you. I'm Dr. Michael Richardson, a nutritionist who helps people balance their blood sugar, improve their metabolic health, and understand their bodies on a deeper level. Now, if you watched my last video on insulin resistance, you already know that carbohydrate metabolism is one of the most misunderstood aspects of human health. But today we're diving even deeper into something that affects millions of people but rarely gets diagnosed properly: carbohydrate intolerance. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what's happening inside your body and what you can actually do about it. Here's the biggest misconception about carbohydrate intolerance. Most people think it's just about eating too many carbs or having poor self-control. They believe that if they just had more willpower, they could handle bread and pasta like everyone else. But that's not how biology works. Carbohydrate intolerance is a metabolic condition where your body has lost the ability to process carbohydrates efficiently. It's not a character flaw. It's not laziness. It's a real physiological state where your cells have become resistant to insulin, your mitochondria are overwhelmed, and your hormonal signals are completely scrambled. Think of it like this. Imagine your cells are like houses with doors, and insulin is the key that opens those doors to let glucose inside for energy. In a healthy metabolism, you eat carbohydrates. They break down into glucose, your pancreas releases insulin, and that insulin opens the cellular doors so glucose can enter and be used for fuel. Simple, elegant, efficient. But in carbohydrate intolerance, those doors have essentially rusted shut. Your pancreas keeps making more and more keys, flooding your bloodstream with insulin, but the doors won't open properly. So glucose builds up in your blood. Insulin levels skyrocket, and your body goes into crisis mode, trying to deal with all this excess fuel it can't process. That's carbohydrate intolerance in a nutshell. Now, before we get into the 8 signs, I need you to understand why this happens in the first place, because once you understand the mechanism, everything else makes perfect sense. Your body evolved over millions of years to handle periods of feast and famine. When food was scarce, which was most of human history, your body became incredibly efficient at storing any excess calories as fat for survival. Carbohydrates trigger insulin release more than any other macronutrient, and insulin is essentially your body's storage hormone. It tells your cells to take glucose out of the bloodstream and either use it immediately or store it for later. In our modern world, we're eating carbohydrates constantly. Breakfast cereal, mid-morning snack, sandwich for lunch, afternoon energy bar, pasta for dinner, dessert before bed. Your insulin levels never get a chance to come down. Your cells are constantly being bombarded with insulin's message to store, store, store. Eventually, your cells basically put up a do not disturb sign. They become resistant to insulin because they're overwhelmed. This is the foundation of carbohydrate intolerance, and it sets off a cascade of metabolic problems that create the 8 signs we're about to discuss. So let's talk about sign number 1. Extreme fatigue after eating carbohydrates. This is often the first red flag that people notice, but they usually chalk it up to just eating too much or needing more coffee. Here's what's actually happening. When you eat a carbohydrate-heavy meal and you have carbohydrate intolerance, your blood sugar spikes rapidly. Your pancreas releases a massive amount of insulin to try to deal with this glucose tsunami. But because your cells are resistant, the glucose doesn't enter your cells efficiently. Your body interprets this as an emergency and releases even more insulin. This excessive insulin eventually forces some glucose into your cells and also drives your blood sugar down, sometimes too far, creating reactive hypoglycemia. That crash leaves you feeling absolutely exhausted, foggy, and desperate for more sugar or caffeine to boost yourself back up. Normal people can eat a sandwich and go about their day with steady energy. But if you have carbohydrate intolerance, that same sandwich triggers a metabolic roller coaster that leaves you wanting to take a nap within the hour. Your coworkers are productive after lunch, but you're barely keeping your eyes open. This isn't normal tiredness. This is your body telling you it can't handle the carbohydrate load you're giving it. Sign number 2 is intense carbohydrate and sugar cravings, especially in the afternoon and evening. Now, everyone experiences cravings from time to time, but I'm talking about something different here. I'm talking about obsessive, intrusive thoughts about bread, pasta, cookies, or sweets. The kind of cravings where you feel like you can't focus on anything else until you get that food. Here's why this happens with carbohydrate intolerance. Remember that blood sugar roller coaster we just discussed? When your blood sugar crashes after that insulin spike, your body panics. Low blood sugar is interpreted by your brain as a survival threat. Your brain depends almost entirely on glucose for fuel. So when blood sugar drops, alarm bells start ringing. Your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and it sends urgent hunger signals, specifically for quick-burning carbohydrates that will raise your blood sugar fast. But here's the cruel irony. When you give in to those cravings and eat more carbohydrates, you just restart the whole cycle. Spike, crash, craving. Spike, crash, craving. It's not a lack of willpower that keeps you reaching for the cookie jar. It's a metabolic trap where your body is stuck in a dysfunctional feedback loop. People with severe carbohydrate intolerance often describe feeling like they're addicted to carbs, and in a very real biochemical sense, they are. Their brains have been hijacked by this blood sugar instability. Sign number 3 is stubborn weight gain, particularly around your midsection, that doesn't respond to calorie restriction or exercise. This is incredibly frustrating for people because they're doing everything they've been told to do. They're eating less, moving more, and the scale won't budge. Sometimes they even gain weight. Here's what's really going on. When you have carbohydrate intolerance, your insulin levels are chronically elevated. Remember, insulin is your storage hormone. When insulin is high, your body is in storage mode, not burning mode. It doesn't matter how few calories you eat or how much you exercise. If your insulin levels are constantly elevated, your body cannot access its fat stores for energy. You're metabolically locked into storage mode. And here's where it gets even more interesting. High insulin levels specifically promote fat storage around your abdomen, in and around your internal organs. This is called visceral fat, and it's the most dangerous type of fat because it's metabolically active, releasing inflammatory compounds that further worsen insulin resistance. So you end up in another vicious cycle. Carbohydrate intolerance raises insulin. Insulin stores belly fat. Belly fat worsens insulin resistance, which requires even more insulin, which stores even more belly fat. You can see how this becomes a self-perpetuating problem that conventional calorie counting approaches simply cannot solve. Sign number 4 is brain fog and difficulty concentrating, especially after meals. Your brain uses about 20% of your body's total energy, and it's extremely sensitive to blood sugar fluctuations. When you have carbohydrate intolerance and you eat a carb-heavy meal, your brain goes through the same spike and crash pattern as the rest of your body. During the spike, you might feel a brief moment of clarity or energy, but it's short-lived. During the crash, your brain is essentially being starved of its preferred fuel source, and cognitive function takes a nosedive. People describe this as feeling like they're thinking through fog, like they can't find words, like they're reading the same sentence over and over without comprehension. Tasks that should be simple become frustratingly difficult. And because this happens after meals, it's particularly problematic for anyone trying to work or study after eating. The standard advice is to eat small, frequent meals to keep blood sugar stable. But for someone with carbohydrate intolerance, that just means more frequent blood sugar spikes and crashes. It's like trying to fix a leaky boat by adding more water. The fundamental problem isn't the timing of meals. It's what those meals contain and how your body processes them. Sign number 5 is increased thirst and frequent urination. Now this one can be subtle, especially if it develops gradually over time. Most people don't think anything of drinking more water or using the bathroom more often. They might even think they're being health conscious by staying hydrated. But excessive thirst and urination can be a sign that your kidneys are working overtime to eliminate excess glucose from your bloodstream. When your blood sugar rises above a certain threshold, usually around 180 milligrams per deciliter, your kidneys can't reabsorb all the glucose, so it spills into your urine. Glucose in urine pulls water with it through a process called osmotic diuresis. So you urinate more frequently and in larger volumes, which makes you thirsty, so you drink more, which makes you urinate more. It's another feedback loop. Now, I need to be very clear here. If you're experiencing significant increases in thirst and urination, that can be a sign of prediabetes or even type 2 diabetes, which are advanced forms of carbohydrate intolerance. This is not something to ignore or self-diagnose. You need to get your fasting glucose, your hemoglobin A1C, and your fasting insulin levels checked by a healthcare provider. These symptoms are your body's way of telling you that your blood sugar regulation is seriously impaired and needs immediate attention. Sign number 6 is skin changes, including skin tags, dark patches on the neck or armpits, and persistent acne. Most people don't connect their skin problems to their metabolism. But your skin is often a mirror of what's happening inside your body. High insulin levels affect your skin in several ways. First, insulin promotes the growth of skin cells, which can lead to those small benign growths called skin tags, usually in areas where skin rubs against skin, like the neck, armpits, or groin. Second, high insulin increases the production of androgens, male hormones that both men and women produce. Elevated androgens stimulate oil production in your skin, leading to clogged pores and acne, especially along the jawline, chin, and back. Third, insulin resistance often causes a condition called acanthosis nigricans, which appears as dark, velvety patches of skin, most commonly on the back of the neck, in the armpits, or in the groin area. This darkening happens because excess insulin stimulates skin cells called keratinocytes to multiply. If you notice these dark patches, this is a strong visual indicator of insulin resistance and carbohydrate intolerance that should prompt immediate metabolic evaluation. Many dermatologists now recognize acanthosis nigricans as a red flag for metabolic disease and will recommend blood sugar testing when they see it. Sign number 7 is hormonal imbalances, manifesting differently in men and women, but with a common metabolic root cause. In women, carbohydrate intolerance and the resulting high insulin levels can lead to polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS, the most common hormonal disorder in women of reproductive age. High insulin levels cause the ovaries to produce excess androgens, which can result in irregular or absent menstrual periods, difficulty getting pregnant, excess facial and body hair, thinning hair on the scalp, and the acne we just discussed. Many women with PCOS have been told it's a gynecological problem, when it's actually a metabolic problem. The ovaries are responding normally to the abnormal hormonal signals created by insulin resistance. In men, carbohydrate intolerance and chronically elevated insulin can lower testosterone levels and increase estrogen through a process called aromatization, where testosterone is converted to estrogen. This can lead to decreased muscle mass, increased body fat, especially in the chest and belly, reduced libido, erectile dysfunction, fatigue, and mood changes. Many men are prescribed testosterone replacement without anyone addressing the underlying insulin resistance that's suppressing their natural testosterone production. In both sexes, the stress hormone cortisol also becomes dysregulated when blood sugar is unstable, creating a whole cascade of additional hormonal problems, including thyroid dysfunction, disrupted sleep-wake cycles, and impaired stress response. Sign number 8 is high blood pressure and abnormal cholesterol patterns. Cardiovascular changes might seem unrelated to carbohydrate metabolism, but they're intimately connected. Chronically elevated insulin causes your kidneys to retain sodium and water, which increases blood volume and raises blood pressure. High insulin also activates your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, which constricts blood vessels and further elevates blood pressure. Over time, this chronic elevation damages the delicate lining of your blood vessels, setting the stage for atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. As for cholesterol, carbohydrate intolerance creates a very specific pattern called atherogenic dyslipidemia. Your triglycerides go up because excess carbohydrates are converted to triglycerides in your liver. Your HDL, or good cholesterol, goes down because high triglycerides interfere with HDL metabolism. And your LDL cholesterol becomes smaller and denser, a more dangerous pattern that's more likely to contribute to arterial plaque formation. You can have normal or even low total cholesterol, but still have this dangerous lipid pattern if you have carbohydrate intolerance. Standard cholesterol testing often misses this because it doesn't measure particle size or triglyceride to HDL ratio, which are much better markers of metabolic health. So, those are the 8 signs. Extreme fatigue after eating carbs, intense carbohydrate and sugar cravings, stubborn weight gain, especially around the middle, brain fog and difficulty concentrating after meals, increased thirst and frequent urination, skin changes including tags, dark patches, and acne, hormonal imbalances affecting reproduction and body composition, and high blood pressure with abnormal cholesterol patterns. If you're experiencing even 3 or 4 of these, there's a very good chance you have some degree of carbohydrate intolerance, and it's time to take action. Now I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds overwhelming. This sounds like everything is broken. But here's what I want you to understand. Carbohydrate intolerance is reversible for most people. Your body is incredibly adaptable. The same mechanisms that led to this condition can be redirected toward healing if you give your body the right inputs. You didn't break yourself overnight, and you won't fix yourself overnight. But consistent action in the right direction creates remarkable change. I've seen people completely transform their metabolic health in 6 to 12 months by addressing the root causes of carbohydrate intolerance. Let me break down the science of why carbohydrate intolerance develops in the first place, because understanding the why makes the how much clearer. There are several key factors that contribute to this condition, and most people have multiple factors working together to create the perfect metabolic storm. Factor 1 is chronic overconsumption of refined carbohydrates and added sugars. Your body did not evolve to handle the sheer quantity of rapidly absorbed carbohydrates in the modern diet. Bread, pasta, rice, cereals, baked goods, sodas, juices, candy, and countless processed foods contain concentrated sources of carbohydrates that flood your system with glucose faster than your body can handle. When our ancestors encountered carbohydrates, it was in the form of wild fruits during certain seasons, tubers that required extensive processing, or occasionally honey. These were relatively rare treats, not the foundation of every single meal. Your genes are still operating with Stone Age programming in a modern food environment that's completely mismatched to your biology. Every time you eat refined carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises rapidly, your pancreas releases insulin, and your cells take up glucose. That's normal and healthy when it happens occasionally. But when it happens multiple times every single day for years or decades, your cells start to protect themselves from this constant bombardment. They reduce the number of insulin receptors on their surface. They become less responsive to insulin's signal, and over time, they develop insulin resistance. Your pancreas compensates by producing even more insulin, but this just masks the problem while making it worse. Eventually, your pancreas can't keep up anymore, and that's when blood sugar starts rising into the pre-diabetic and diabetic range. Factor 2 is visceral fat accumulation and chronic inflammation. Visceral fat, that deep belly fat surrounding your organs, isn't just storage tissue sitting there inert. It's an active endocrine organ that secretes hormones and inflammatory molecules called cytokines. These inflammatory compounds directly interfere with insulin signaling in your cells, worsening insulin resistance. And remember, insulin resistance causes visceral fat storage, and visceral fat worsens insulin resistance. So once this process starts, it accelerates itself. Breaking this cycle requires addressing both the dietary causes of insulin resistance and the inflammatory state created by visceral fat. Factor 3 is mitochondrial dysfunction. Your mitochondria are the energy factories inside your cells, and they're where glucose is ultimately converted into usable energy in the form of ATP. When you constantly overload your mitochondria with excess glucose, they become damaged and dysfunctional. It's like running a factory at maximum capacity 24 hours a day with no maintenance. Eventually, the machinery breaks down. Damaged mitochondria can't efficiently burn glucose for energy, which means more of that glucose gets converted to fat and stored. They also produce more free radicals and oxidative stress, which damages cells and worsens insulin resistance. Healing mitochondria requires giving them a break from constant glucose influx and providing the nutrients they need to repair themselves. Factor 4 is inadequate muscle mass and physical inactivity. Your muscles are your body's largest glucose disposal system. When you use your muscles, especially during resistance training or high-intensity exercise, they take up glucose from your bloodstream without requiring much insulin at all. Exercise activates glucose transporters in muscle cells through a completely different pathway than insulin. This is why exercise can lower blood sugar even in people with severe insulin resistance. But in our modern sedentary lifestyle, most people have lost significant muscle mass and rarely use the muscle they do have. This means their primary glucose disposal system is essentially offline. Without adequate muscle mass and regular muscle contraction, your body has to rely entirely on insulin to manage blood sugar, and that system becomes overwhelmed. Factor 5 is chronic stress and elevated cortisol. Your body can't distinguish between different types of stress. Whether you're running from a predator or dealing with a demanding boss and financial pressure and relationship problems, your body releases the same stress hormones, primarily cortisol. Cortisol raises blood sugar because it assumes you need quick energy for physical action. In our modern world, we have chronic psychological stress that keeps cortisol elevated, which means blood sugar is chronically elevated, which means insulin is chronically elevated, which drives insulin resistance. Stress also disrupts sleep, increases inflammation, and drives cravings for comfort foods, usually high-carb options. It's all interconnected. So now that you understand the mechanisms behind carbohydrate intolerance, let's talk about what you can actually do about it. I'm going to give you a step-by-step action plan that addresses all of these root causes. This isn't about perfection, it's about consistent progress. Some of these steps might be easier for you than others, and that's fine. Start where you can and build from there. Step 1 is to dramatically reduce your intake of refined carbohydrates and added sugars. Notice, I didn't say eliminate all carbohydrates. I said reduce refined carbohydrates and added sugars. There's a huge difference between eating an apple and eating apple juice, between eating a sweet potato and eating potato chips, between eating oatmeal and eating a donut. Refined carbohydrates are foods where the fiber has been removed and the carbohydrate has been concentrated. White bread, white rice, pasta, baked goods, crackers, chips, cereals, and anything with added sugar. These are the primary drivers of insulin resistance and need to be minimized or eliminated, at least initially, while you're healing your metabolism. Instead, focus on whole food sources of carbohydrates that come packaged with fiber, vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients. Non-starchy vegetables should be the foundation of your carbohydrate intake. Things like leafy greens, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, peppers, mushrooms, zucchini. These provide nutrients and fiber with minimal impact on blood sugar. If you tolerate starchy vegetables well, you can include moderate amounts of sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, winter squash, and root vegetables. If you tolerate fruit well, focus on berries which are lower in sugar and whole fruits rather than fruit juice. Some people with severe carbohydrate intolerance need to limit even these healthier carbohydrate sources temporarily until their insulin sensitivity improves. Step 2 is to increase your protein intake at every meal. Protein has minimal impact on blood sugar. It increases satiety so you feel full and satisfied, and it preserves muscle mass during weight loss. Most people dramatically undereat protein. You should aim for at least 20 to 30 grams of protein at each main meal, possibly more if you're physically active or trying to build muscle. Good sources include meat, fish, poultry, eggs, dairy if you tolerate it, and plant sources like legumes, tofu, and tempeh, though you'll need larger portions of plant proteins to get adequate amounts. When you eat protein with carbohydrates, it slows down the absorption of those carbohydrates and reduces the blood sugar spike. So this is a simple way to improve your glucose response, even if you're not ready to eliminate carbs completely yet. Step 3 is to embrace healthy fats and stop fearing them. For decades, we were told that fat makes you fat, and that we should eat low-fat diets, but that advice has been an absolute disaster for metabolic health. When you remove fat from your diet, you inevitably replace it with carbohydrates. And we've just explained why that's problematic for people with carbohydrate intolerance. Fat does not raise blood sugar or require insulin for metabolism. Fat provides stable, long-lasting energy without the blood sugar roller coaster. Fat is essential for hormone production, including insulin signaling molecules. And fat makes food delicious and satisfying, so you're not constantly fighting cravings. Include sources of healthy fats at every meal. Olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, butter or ghee from grass-fed animals, nuts and seeds, fatty fish like salmon and sardines, whole eggs, avocados. Don't be afraid to eat until you're satisfied. When you reduce carbohydrates, your body shifts toward using fat for fuel, and you need to provide adequate fat to support this metabolic shift. Many people find that when they increase fat and protein and reduce refined carbs, they naturally eat less overall because they finally feel truly full and satisfied after meals. Step 4 is to implement some form of time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting. Now stay with me here if fasting sounds intimidating. I'm not talking about extended, multi-day fasts. I'm talking about simply limiting the window of time during which you eat each day. The simplest approach is to stop eating after dinner and not eat again until lunch the next day, creating a 16-hour fasting window with an 8-hour eating window. During the fasting period, you drink water, black coffee, or tea, but no calories. Why is this so powerful for carbohydrate intolerance? Because insulin levels can only drop when you're not eating. Remember, every time you eat, especially carbohydrates, insulin goes up. Your body needs extended periods with low insulin in order to restore insulin sensitivity. When you eat 5 or 6 times a day, which is what many diet plans recommend, your insulin never gets a chance to fully drop. You're constantly in storage mode. Fasting gives your body a break from the constant influx of glucose and the constant demand for insulin production. It allows your cells to become more sensitive to insulin again. It activates cellular repair processes called autophagy, where cells clean out damaged components, including damaged mitochondria. And it shifts your metabolism toward burning stored fat for energy. Start gradually, if needed. Maybe start by just eliminating snacks and eating 3 meals a day with nothing in between. Then, try pushing breakfast later by an hour each week until you've naturally arrived at a compressed eating window. Most people find that once they adapt, they actually feel better fasting than they ever did eating constantly. The energy becomes stable, the mental clarity improves, and the constant food thoughts disappear. Step 5 is to move your body daily, with a focus on both resistance training and low-intensity movement. Remember, muscle is your body's glucose disposal system. Building and using muscle is one of the most powerful interventions for improving insulin sensitivity. You want to include resistance training, whether that's lifting weights, using resistance bands, or doing body weight exercises, at least 2 to 3 times per week. Focus on compound movements that work multiple muscle groups, like squats, deadlifts, push-ups, rows, and presses. The goal is to progressively challenge your muscles so they adapt by growing stronger and more metabolically active. You also want to include daily movement that isn't necessarily structured exercise. Walking is incredibly underrated for metabolic health. A 20 to 30-minute walk after meals, especially after dinner, significantly blunts the blood sugar spike from that meal by shuttling glucose into your muscles. Walking also reduces stress, supports cardiovascular health, aids digestion, and doesn't create the same cortisol response that intense exercise can. If you can accumulate 8 to 10,000 steps per day, through a combination of deliberate walking and just moving more throughout your day, you'll see substantial improvements in your insulin sensitivity and overall metabolic health. Step 6 is to prioritize sleep and manage stress. These are not optional, nice-to-haves. They're fundamental pillars of metabolic health. Poor sleep, even just one night of inadequate sleep, significantly impairs insulin sensitivity. Chronic sleep deprivation increases cortisol, increases hunger hormones like ghrelin, decreases satiety hormones like leptin, and makes you crave high-carbohydrate comfort foods. Most adults need 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night. Create a consistent sleep schedule. Make your bedroom cool and dark. Avoid screens for at least an hour before bed, and consider your evening routine as sacred time for winding down. Chronic stress, as we discussed, keeps cortisol elevated, which keeps blood sugar elevated. You need to find stress management practices that actually work for you. This might be meditation, deep breathing exercises, yoga, time in nature, creative hobbies, connecting with loved ones, therapy or counseling, or whatever helps you genuinely relax and decompress. This isn't about adding more items to your to-do list. It's about intentionally creating space for rest and recovery, because your body cannot heal when it's in constant survival mode. Step 7 is to consider targeted supplementation to support insulin sensitivity and metabolic function. Now, I always say food first, but certain supplements have strong evidence for improving carbohydrate metabolism. Magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions, including glucose metabolism and insulin signaling, and most people are deficient. Chromium helps insulin work more effectively at the cellular level. Berberine has been shown in numerous studies to lower blood sugar and improve insulin sensitivity as effectively as some diabetes medications. Alpha-lipoic acid is a powerful antioxidant that improves insulin sensitivity and helps regenerate other antioxidants. Omega-3 fatty acids from fish oil reduce inflammation and improve insulin signaling. And vitamin D, which is actually a hormone, plays a crucial role in insulin secretion and sensitivity, and deficiency is extremely common. Work with a knowledgeable healthcare provider to determine which supplements might be most beneficial for your specific situation and to ensure proper dosing and quality. Supplements are meant to supplement, not replace, the dietary and lifestyle changes we've discussed, but when used strategically, they can accelerate your progress and support your body's healing processes. Now, I want to acknowledge that all of this can feel overwhelming, especially if you're dealing with multiple health issues or if you've tried and failed at dietary changes before. Here's what I want you to understand. You don't have to do all of this perfectly starting tomorrow. Sustainable change happens through small, consistent actions repeated over time. Pick one or two of these steps that feel most accessible to you right now and start there. Maybe you start by just adding protein to your breakfast and going for a walk after dinner. That's enough. Do that consistently for a few weeks until it becomes habit. Then add another change. Progress compounds. Small improvements in insulin sensitivity make the next changes easier because you'll have more energy, fewer cravings, and better mental clarity to make good decisions. Also understand that healing from carbohydrate intolerance takes time. You didn't develop insulin resistance overnight, and you won't reverse it overnight. But here's the encouraging part. You'll start feeling better much faster than you might expect. Many people notice improved energy, reduced cravings, and better mental clarity within just a few days to a couple of weeks of reducing refined carbs and stabilizing blood sugar. Weight loss and improved lab markers typically follow within a few months. Significant reversal of insulin resistance generally takes 6 to 12 months of consistent effort. But every single day you're making these changes. You're moving in the right direction. Your body wants to heal. You just need to create the conditions that allow healing to happen. I also want to mention that some people will need additional support beyond lifestyle changes alone. If you've had carbohydrate intolerance for many years, if you've progressed to pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, if you have PCOS or other significant hormonal imbalances, you may benefit from working with a functional medicine practitioner, an endocrinologist, or a registered dietitian who specializes in metabolic health. There's no shame in getting professional help. In fact, it's often the smartest thing you can do because personalized guidance based on your specific labs, symptoms, and circumstances can help you avoid trial and error and get better results faster. Testing is also important for tracking your progress and catching problems early. At minimum, you should have your fasting glucose, hemoglobin A1C, and fasting insulin tested. These give you a clear picture of your blood sugar control and insulin levels. Ideally, you'd also get a complete lipid panel, including particle size, liver function tests, and inflammatory markers like high-sensitivity C-reactive protein. These tests provide objective data about what's happening inside your body and allow you to adjust your approach based on results rather than just guessing. One thing I see all the time is people who make significant lifestyle changes but then sabotage themselves by thinking they've earned the right to go back to their old eating patterns once they start feeling better. I get it. You've been working hard. You're seeing results. You want to celebrate. You miss your favorite foods. But here's the reality. If you have carbohydrate intolerance, you likely have a lifelong tendency toward insulin resistance. You can dramatically improve your metabolic health and even restore normal blood sugar regulation. But if you go back to eating the way you did before, you'll end up right back where you started. This isn't about a temporary diet. It's about finding a sustainable way of eating that supports your metabolic health long-term. The good news is that this gets easier over time. As your insulin sensitivity improves, you'll likely find that you can tolerate moderate amounts of healthier carbohydrates without problems. Many people find they can maintain excellent metabolic health eating moderate amounts of whole food carbohydrates like potatoes, rice, fruit, and even occasional treats, as long as the foundation of their diet remains protein, healthy fats, and non-starchy vegetables. The key is listening to your body. If you reintroduce a food and notice the return of symptoms like energy crashes, cravings, or brain fog, that's your body telling you it's not ready for that food yet. Respect those signals. I also want to address the social and emotional aspects of changing your diet because this is where a lot of people struggle. Food is deeply tied to culture, family, tradition, celebration, comfort, and identity. Changing what you eat can feel like you're losing part of yourself or distancing yourself from your community. You might face resistance from family members who don't understand why you're not eating the foods they prepared. You might feel isolated at social events where food plays a central role. You might grieve the loss of comfort foods that have been your go-to coping mechanism for stress or sadness. These feelings are valid and normal. But I want you to also consider this perspective. What you're actually losing is the foods and patterns that were making you sick. What you're gaining is energy, mental clarity, hormonal balance, reduced disease risk, and potentially years or decades of healthy life. You're not depriving yourself. You're choosing yourself, or choosing to feel good in your body. And once you truly experience what it feels like to have stable energy all day, to think clearly, to sleep well, to not be controlled by cravings, you won't want to go back. The foods that used to seem impossible to give up often lose their appeal once you realize how terrible they actually made you feel. As for social situations, you can absolutely navigate these while staying true to your health goals. Communicate your needs clearly, but without being preachy or judgmental about what others eat. Bring dishes to share that fit your way of eating. Eat before events if you know there won't be good options. Focus on the people and the experience rather than the food. And remember that you always have the power to choose what you put in your body. No one else can make that choice for you, and you don't owe anyone an explanation for taking care of your health. Let me also talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, which is the mental and emotional component of eating and metabolism. Many people with carbohydrate intolerance have a complicated relationship with food that goes beyond just physical cravings. Food may have been used for comfort during difficult times. Eating may be one of the few pleasures or rewards in an otherwise stressful life. There may be deeper emotional issues around control, worthiness, or self-care that manifest through eating behaviors. If you find yourself eating in response to emotions rather than hunger, if you eat in secret or feel shame around food, if you binge or restrict in cycles, these are signs that the relationship with food has an emotional component that needs addressing. Working with a therapist, particularly one who specializes in eating behaviors, or who uses approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavior therapy, can be incredibly valuable. Healing your metabolism and healing your relationship with food often need to happen in parallel. When you only address the physical side without addressing the emotional side, it's very difficult to sustain change because you haven't dealt with the underlying drivers of the behavior. Similarly, if you've experienced trauma, particularly childhood trauma, this can affect your metabolism in profound ways. Chronic stress from trauma keeps cortisol elevated, disrupts sleep, increases inflammation, and often leads to coping mechanisms that include overeating or eating processed comfort foods. Trauma can literally change your brain's reward systems and stress response systems in ways that make you more vulnerable to developing carbohydrate intolerance and other metabolic problems. Healing trauma through appropriate therapy and support is an essential part of full metabolic recovery for many people. I also want to touch on the fact that metabolic health doesn't exist in a vacuum. Your metabolic health is influenced by and influences virtually every other system in your body. Your gut health affects your insulin sensitivity through the gut microbiome's influence on inflammation, hormone production, and nutrient absorption. Your thyroid function affects your metabolic rate and how efficiently you use glucose. Your sex hormones affect insulin sensitivity and body composition. Your liver health determines how well you can clear excess glucose and toxins. Your mental health affects cortisol, sleep, and eating behaviors. This is why a truly holistic approach that considers the whole person rather than just isolated symptoms tends to be most effective. For example, if you have an underlying gut issue like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or leaky gut, you might find that certain healthy carbohydrates that should be fine actually trigger problems. This doesn't mean carbohydrates are the enemy. It means your gut needs healing. Similarly, if you have hypothyroidism that's not adequately treated, you might struggle to lose weight or improve your metabolic markers even with perfect diet and lifestyle habits because your metabolic rate is suppressed. The point is to stay curious about your body, work with knowledgeable practitioners who can help you investigate root causes, and recognize that sometimes you need to address multiple systems to get the full picture. One question I get frequently is whether carbohydrate intolerance is the same as diabetes, and the answer is that they exist on a spectrum. Carbohydrate intolerance and insulin resistance are the early stages of the process that eventually leads to prediabetes and type 2 diabetes if left unchecked. Type 2 diabetes is diagnosed when your fasting blood sugar is 126 or higher, or your hemoglobin A1C is 6.5% or higher. But the disease process starts decades earlier with insulin resistance. By the time you're diagnosed with diabetes, you've likely had insulin resistance for 10 or 20 years. Your pancreas is already damaged, and reversing the condition becomes much more difficult, though still possible for many people. This is why catching carbohydrate intolerance early is so critical. If you recognize the 8 signs we discussed and take action now, you can prevent progression to diabetes. You can restore normal insulin sensitivity. You can heal your metabolism before permanent damage occurs. But if you ignore the warning signs for years because your doctor says your blood sugar is still in the normal range, or because you think it's just part of getting older, you're giving the disease process time to advance. Don't wait for a diabetes diagnosis to take your metabolic health seriously. The 8 signs are your early warning system. Listen to them. I want to spend a moment talking about what success looks like because I think people often have unrealistic expectations. Success is not achieving a perfect body, or never wanting a cookie again, or having absolutely flawless blood sugar readings. Success is progressively feeling better, having more good days than bad days, seeing your labs move in the right direction, being able to do activities you couldn't do before, reducing or eliminating medications under your doctor's supervision, and most importantly, developing a sustainable relationship with food and your body that you can maintain for life. You'll have setbacks. You'll have days where you make choices that don't support your health goals. You'll have periods where stress or life circumstances make it harder to stick to your plan. That's not failure. That's being human. What matters is that you don't let a setback become a spiral. One meal, or one day, or even 1 week of eating in a way that doesn't serve you doesn't undo all your progress. Just get back on track with your next meal. Progress is not linear. There will be ups and downs. But if the overall trajectory is in the right direction, you're succeeding. Also recognize that your body might need different things at different life stages or in different circumstances. A woman's hormonal fluctuations during the menstrual cycle, pregnancy, postpartum, and menopause all affect insulin sensitivity and carbohydrate tolerance. Men's hormonal changes with aging, particularly declining testosterone, affect metabolism. Periods of high stress, illness, or inadequate sleep will temporarily impair glucose control. This doesn't mean you've failed or that the approach doesn't work. It means you need to adjust and be flexible while staying committed to the core principles of metabolic health. Let me give you some practical examples of what a day of eating might look like for someone managing carbohydrate intolerance. Remember, this needs to be personalized based on your individual tolerance, activity level, and preferences, but this gives you a general framework. You might wake up and have black coffee or tea during your fasting period. For your first meal around noon, you might have a 3-egg omelet cooked in butter with spinach, mushrooms, and peppers, plus half an avocado and a side of berries. That's high protein, healthy fats, minimal impact on blood sugar, and very satisfying. For dinner, maybe 6 ounces of grilled salmon with a large salad of mixed greens, cucumbers, tomatoes, olive oil, and vinegar dressing, and roasted Brussels sprouts cooked in avocado oil, plus a small serving of sweet potato if you tolerate it. After dinner, you stop eating, drink herbal tea or water if you want, and don't eat again until lunch the next day. Notice how there's no bread, pasta, rice, or processed foods, but there's plenty of nutrient-dense, satisfying food. You're not starving yourself. You're nourishing your body with foods that support stable blood sugar and insulin sensitivity. Some people do better with 3 meals and no snacking. Others do better with 2 larger meals. Some people find they need a small amount of carbohydrates around their workouts to support performance and recovery. Others thrive on very low carbohydrate intake. This is where self-experimentation comes in. Pay attention to how you feel. Track your energy, your hunger levels, your mental clarity, your cravings, your sleep quality. If something isn't working, adjust it. There's no single perfect diet for everyone. There's only the diet that works best for your individual body and circumstances. I want to address one more common concern, which is whether this way of eating is safe or healthy long-term, particularly when it comes to reducing carbohydrates. The answer is yes. It's not only safe, but often optimal for people with carbohydrate intolerance. Carbohydrates are not an essential nutrient in the way that protein and fat are. Your body can synthesize all the glucose it needs through a process called gluconeogenesis. There are essential amino acids from protein and essential fatty acids from fat that you must get from your diet because your body can't make them. There are no essential carbohydrates. That said, I'm not advocating for zero carbohydrate intake for most people. Vegetables are carbohydrates, and they provide crucial fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients that support overall health. Some people do very well including moderate amounts of whole food starches and fruits. The key is finding the level of carbohydrate intake that keeps your blood sugar stable, your insulin levels low, and your symptoms resolved. For some people, that might be 50 grams of carbohydrates per day. For others, it might be 150 grams per day, as long as those carbohydrates come from whole food sources and not refined products. What's absolutely clear from both research and clinical practice is that the standard American diet, with its foundation of refined grains and added sugars, is metabolically destructive, particularly for people with any degree of carbohydrate intolerance. Moving away from that way of eating toward a whole foods diet centered on protein, healthy fats, and vegetables is one of the most health-promoting changes anyone can make, regardless of whether they have metabolic issues or not. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you for sticking with me through this comprehensive overview of carbohydrate intolerance. I know it's a lot of information, but metabolic health is complex, and I want you to have a complete understanding of what's happening in your body and what you can do about it. The 8 signs we discussed are your body's way of communicating that something is wrong. Extreme fatigue after eating carbs, intense cravings, stubborn weight gain around the middle, brain fog after meals, increased thirst and urination, skin changes, hormonal imbalances, and cardiovascular changes. These are not random symptoms. They're all connected through the common thread of insulin resistance and impaired carbohydrate metabolism. But here's the empowering part. You're not helpless in the face of this condition. You have tremendous power to influence your metabolic health through the choices you make every single day. What you eat, when you eat, how you move, how you sleep, how you manage stress, all of these factors either promote insulin sensitivity or promote insulin resistance. The path forward requires commitment and consistency, but it's absolutely achievable, and the rewards in terms of how you feel and your long-term health are immeasurable. If you found this information valuable, I really encourage you to go back and watch my previous video on insulin resistance, where I dive even deeper into the mechanisms and discuss additional strategies for improving metabolic health. Understanding insulin resistance is foundational to understanding virtually all chronic metabolic and cardiovascular diseases. So it's worth your time to really learn this material thoroughly. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.